Taiwan considers another arms deal with the U.S., reportedly including one of the most expensive defense systems in the world. Educators and students urge Taiwan's government to change its bilingual nation policy.
那当如果学生他完全丧失了对于语言学习的兴趣，他基本上他就是会选择摆烂。
Drenched yet again, Taiwan's northeast coast sees heavy flooding after more late monsoon rains. Plus, Taiwan and Ukraine share a moment of solidarity as both countries face threats from their larger neighbors. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Philip Brossard. Taipei is responding to a Financial Times report that Taiwan is eyeing a $15 billion arms sale from the U.S., with Defense Minister Wellington Gu saying the country is still taking an asymmetric approach to its defense, pushing for smaller, more mobile weapons. The report says the arms deal includes the F-35 fighter jet, but does Taiwan really need the system? Jaime Ocon reports.
This is the U.S. F-35. It's the most advanced fighter jet in the world, and Taiwan is reportedly looking to acquire the aircraft. But its high cost and sensitive military technology have prompted many observers to question just how effective this system would be for the country's defense. Taiwan's military told TaiwanPlus that it will always procure the weapons it believes it needs to create a robust defense. And Taiwan's defense minister says he won't say anything more on the potential sale.
特定的武器装备等等的，我想我并不适宜，我们都不会在任何公开知会国会之前，我们做任何公开的说明。
The question came up after a Financial Times article revealed potential plans for Taiwan to spend over $15 billion on U.S. weapons and systems. Systems like retired U.S. destroyers, air defense missiles, and the F-35. Taiwan is already working to upgrade its existing fleet of F-16 fighter jets, and there have been calls for the country to try and modernize other aircraft in its fleet. Analysts say the F-35's ability to land and take off vertically without needing a full runway is one reason to consider buying the jet.
And that is actually one of the potential solutions to Taiwan's security problem threat from China, that airports and runway getting cratered. So that is one thing that I said that the F-35B is one thing that Taiwan's been looking for.
The Financial Times quotes a former Trump administration official as saying that Taiwan's decision to go big on the U.S. arms sale is to demonstrate that it is fully committed to defending itself. But skeptics say that the fighter's high price tag is not worth it. The base cost of one variant of the F-35 is roughly $83 million, while some variants of Taiwan's F-16 have a base cost of $70 million. And that's just to acquire the aircraft. After that, Taiwan would still need to pay for the infrastructure and support needed to maintain the jets. And some analysts say they do little for the country's defense.
And this isn't the first time that there has been, quiet feeling out of each other on potential F-35 sales. But I think that it's a very short-sighted move. Ultimately, American political leaders are going to look at how much Taiwan is resisting PRC aggression, how long Taiwan can hold out. And F-35s don't address either of those questions.
Many observers say that while Taiwan does need more modern equipment, it could use its limited defense budget on more effective systems like mines, missiles, and communications. But whether or not those kinds of investments show Taipei's commitment to defense will be up to interpretation from the incoming U.S. administration. John Su and Jaime Ocon for TaiwanPlus.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has reportedly tapped billionaire Elon Musk and former Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy to head up the newly created Department of Government Efficiency. Both men are well-known supporters of Trump from the private sector. Musk posted on X saying they will do away with bureaucracy and slash excess government spending. In the run-up to the election, Musk made numerous public appearances with Trump and gave over $100 million to his presidential campaign. Trump also appointed known China hawk Mike Waltz as his national security advisor. Since 2012, Taiwanese exports to the U.S. have increased over 100%, with cooperation on semiconductors and technology set to improve through the CHIPS Act. But Taiwan now has to face a new U.S. administration with new economic policies. To learn more, Alec McDonald spoke with Daniel Liu, a scholar at the Zhonghua Institution for Economic Research.
The word uncertain has been used to describe a lot of Trump's proposed economic policies. What might be some of his economic policies in the first year?
My answer would be, as we know, Trump is, the firm believers in tariff. As a result, during his campaign, he mentioned many times, he will use the tariff, to counter the negative impact on the U.S. As a result, I think the major difference between Trump and Biden is Biden major imposed tariff on mainland China. However, during the campaign, Trump mentioned about he will apply the tariff, not only on mainland China, but also on the, he will set up with so-called universal tariff that will impose on all the U.S. imports. Of course, that will include Taiwan and other countries. In particular, he will also, emphasize on, to prohibit, the electric vehicles export to the U.S. from Mexico. So he will also target a very high tariff on the Mexico product. So that will create very, very significant uncertainty, around the world, because tariff is we so-called old-fashioned. It's an old trade policy tool that was used in last century.
So if Trump does apply these tariffs to China and a universal tariff to many other nations, what might be the downstream effect for Taiwan?
After the U.S.-China trade war, we can see a very significant change in the Taiwanese export structure, which means, our export to mainland China declined significantly. Instead, our export to the U.S., increased. I can give you some new figures. According to the first 9 months of this year, our export to the U.S. already account 1/4 of our Taiwanese total exports. U.S. is already Taiwan's second largest export market. As a result, if Trump, impose a universal tariff on the world, that will of course, slow down our export momentum.
So what it might be a quite turbulent economy, what are the opportunities and challenges for Taiwan?
At first, I would say what is the challenge? I think not only for Taiwan, also for the other East Asian countries. The first one is Biden's policy is we so-called made by U.S., which means you have to move out from China to set up factories, in the East Asia, in Taiwan, in Mexico. That is acceptable for Biden administration. However, Trump is very, very upset about the firms, the factories not set up in the U.S. So he will change Biden's mindset from made by the U.S. to the made in the U.S., which means in order to not to occur the retaliation from the U.S., maybe Taiwanese firm may have to invest in the U.S., not only the TSMC, we can see in the future many other Taiwanese firms, in order to avoid the U.S., the high tariff or the retaliation, they have to invest in the U.S.
That was Daniel Liu from the Zhonghua Institution for Economic Research. Educators in Taiwan are airing their concerns about the country's bilingual nation policy. The Education Ministry recently announced improvements to the policy, but teachers say there's still not enough to give students a fair education. Tiffany Wong reports.
The National Federation of Teachers Unions is calling for more changes to Taiwan's bilingual education policy, saying that it's made mixed progress over the past 6 years and that's even negatively impacted students' education. Their biggest concern is a requirement known as English as a Medium of Instruction, or EMI, that requires students to take some subjects in English, which they say could actually hinder their understanding of the topics.
曾经出现中文系的教授要用英文来教授中文，教授这个专业的语文的一个课程，这样的一个非常荒谬的一个现象。那透过这样的一个课程，让学生不止没有学到该有的专业，还影响原本的一个学习。那时间一过，对于整体学生的一个学习表现，我想是一个很大的一个伤害。
Earlier this week, the Ministry of Education announced improvements to the bilingual policy, promising to offer more opportunities to speak English outside of the classroom and promoting new technologies to assist with language learning. It also adjusted lessons so only English language classes would be taught in English. But this change only applies to primary and secondary schools, not in higher education. Some students still have concerns about the policy.
我们认为全英文授课它其实会让那些听不懂英文的学生造成他们对于英文的恐惧，或者是说他会丧失对于语言学习的一个兴趣。那如果学生他完全丧失了对于语言学习的兴趣，他基本上他就是会选择摆烂。
The policy aims to make Taiwan into a bilingual nation by 2030, to make the country's talent more competitive and attract international companies to Taiwan. The educators here say that that's made English language education in Taiwan more competitive, adding pressure on students, parents, and educators to spend time and money on a language that's still not widely used in the country today. Yilan Chen and Tiffany Wong in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Top Russian and Chinese officials have pledged greater cooperation to counter what they called U.S. containment policies against their countries. Russian defense official Sergei Shoigu met with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi for security talks in Beijing. Shoigu said Russia and China should prioritize countering U.S. containment. The two countries have strengthened military and defense ties since Russia's invasion of Ukraine nearly 3 years ago. China has claimed neutrality in that war. Workers have cleared memorials for the victims of a deadly hit-and-run case in the Chinese city of Zhuhai. On Monday, a man drove his car into a group of people at the city's sports center, killing 35 and injuring 43. There was an outpouring of grief from the local community, with residents leaving flowers at a makeshift memorial dedicated to the victims. But Chinese workers were seen removing items from the memorial. Officials have censored reporting of the incident in local media, with foreign reporters also experiencing harassment. Coming up after the break, the Premier 12 baseball tournament is winding up for its first pitch at the Taipei Dome.
We bring you stories from Taiwan.
Every day of the week.
Our reporters travel the nation.
Exploring the issues that matter to you.
News from here in Taiwan and around the world.
What's up, Taiwan? On TaiwanPlus. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, download the TaiwanPlus app.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Taipei's delegation to this year's Apec summit is hoping to drive home the importance of Taiwanese tech on the global stage while maintaining connections with the event's host. Reese Ayers reports from Peru.
Taiwanese tech can help solve global issues. A message being broadcast around Lima during this year's Apec summit, with Taiwan taking out ad space on billboards across the Peruvian capital, as business leaders and officials head to Peru for the annual economic forum. Leading Taiwan's delegation is Lin Xin-yi, former economy minister, who's emphasized the range of areas Taiwan's tech can be used.
当然，这当中数位医疗、农业以及中小企业是我们台湾的强项。
Taiwan produces around 90% of the world's most advanced semiconductors, powering much of the planet's AI and computer systems. It's that tech, the delegation reminds, that makes Taiwan an indispensable part of the global community.
强调的是也是呼应今年秘鲁年会的主题父权包容跟成长，也就是说，台湾用一颗晶片来驱动世界的繁荣动力。
Taiwan is hoping to create new opportunities through Apec. It has long had relations with Peru, though not official. The two countries each host an economic and cultural office in their capital cities to engage with communities in both countries.
我们长期协助了秘鲁的这个非政府组织呢，还有大型的这个媒体集团呢，进行社会辅助的一个工作。从过去3年呢，我们已经有捐助过超过200吨的一个食材，对于秘鲁贫困人民的一个生活上面的辅助，贡献一些台湾来的心力。
The billboards across Lima echo a mantra Taipei has been broadcasting for years: Taiwan can help. It's a message Taiwan's delegation hopes to convey throughout the economic forum, building on existing relations, while looking ahead to the future of Taiwan in Peru and the rest of the global community. Scott Huang, Harel Hughes, and Reese Ayres in Lima, Peru for TaiwanPlus.
Stay tuned all this week for more of our reports coming out of Lima about the Apec summit. Typhoon Usagi is set to turn towards Taiwan, sweeping past the southeast of the main island over the weekend. Forecasters expect high waves as the storm approaches, and already ferries between the main island and Green Island are canceled from Thursday afternoon through Friday. The storm will bring rain to much of Taiwan, especially along the east coast and in the far south. Torrential rains have flooded Taiwan's northeast coast, inundating businesses and cutting transportation links. John Van Trieste reports.
When these diners sat down at this popular restaurant in Yilan County, the floor was damp from the rain outside. But halfway through their meal, floodwaters had reached up to their ankles. Not everyone is so cheerful about the torrential rain that's hit the northeast coast, the result of seasonal monsoon winds combined with distant tropical storm Taraji. Cars and scooters were left submerged. Shop owners that had sandbags on hand rushed to protect their businesses from the rising waters. And safety concerns forced this school to shut early.
因为雨大的影响，提早大概45分钟。最主要是因为现在天也暗，然后雨又这么大，怕家长们等一下的接送不方便。
While the East Coast's only rail link was left impassable.
下午2点32分有通报，就是因为水淹过轨面，所以双线不通。目前都在前后端的车站在等待水退之后就会恢复通勤。
Less than a kilometer of track was flooded, but that was enough to leave passengers stranded.
不知道啊，那怎么办？因为乌坦说改搭别的交通工具，可是往花莲没有别的交通工具啊。
By 4 p.m., over 300 millimeters of rain had fallen on the region. And though the downpours have eased up, occasional rain is still in the forecast until late Wednesday, leaving a big wet mess to clean up. Chris Ma and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Colombia is reeling from heavy flooding and landslides across much of the country. The floods have affected tens of thousands of families in Colombia's northwest. President Gustavo Petro declared a national state of disaster over the weekend and canceled his trip to the COP29 climate conference to stay in the country and oversee aid efforts. The floods follow a month of climate-related disasters worldwide, including record-breaking floods in Spain and severe hurricanes in Cuba and the United States. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine nearly 3 years ago, Taiwan has donated over $100 million in aid to Kyiv. Taipei has also been learning from Ukraine's experience as it prepares for its own potential conflict with China. Cadence Quaranta reports.
In Taipei, people pay their respects to a dead Taiwanese soldier, one killed thousands of kilometers away, fighting against Russian forces in Ukraine. People here told us Wu Zhongda went to Ukraine twice and was killed by Russian shelling. A fellow volunteer says Wu was determined to stay in the fight.
后来他说他要回去，我说真的假？我有劝过他不用，你已经做的，你们都已经有帮助到他们了，不要再回去冒险。啊，可是他说他还想去帮助他们。
Around 40 people showed up to this church to mourn his death. Wu is the second Taiwanese soldier known to have died fighting in Ukraine. Ukraine's resistance to Russia has resonated with many in Taiwan, which faces its own existential threat from China, which has vowed to take Taiwan by force if necessary. When Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called for foreign volunteers to join the fight, some people from Taiwan stepped up.
你中国人都在帮助俄罗斯，那我们台湾人为什么不能帮助乌克兰？
Taiwan has helped in other ways, too. One think tank says the country has sent at least 800 tons of humanitarian and medical aid to Ukraine, and at least $126 million in donations to help with power, healthcare, and social services. While most of this aid comes from government funds, civil society groups and regular people in Taiwan have also raised money to help. One local movement says they have raised at least tens of thousands of US dollars for supplies for Ukraine's war effort.
So for military purposes, of course, most often those are drones, small drones that have proven to be extremely useful at the battlefield. And then for humanitarian purposes, there's a lot of kind of needs that we're covering.
Volunteers from both Taiwan and Ukraine have their own reasons for raising funds.
One of the major motivations is, of course, Taiwanese people relating to Ukraine and sort of projecting some of those uncertainties, perhaps, and some of that grief that Ukrainians have been experiencing from before the war and after onto themselves.
Some of Taiwan's leaders have also pointed out the parallels between Taiwan and Ukraine.
Everything we're doing now is to prevent the pain and suffering of the tragedy of Ukraine from being repeated in our scenario in Taiwan.
In December 2022, former Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen extended mandatory military service for men from 4 months to a year. And seeing Ukraine's successful use of drones and portable anti-tank weapons on the battlefield, Taiwan's defense ministry has moved up its own domestic production. So, as it prepares for a potential conflict with China, Taiwan is both helping and learning from Ukraine. Ryan Wu and Kins Koranta for TaiwanPlus.
Shell has triumphed over the overturning of a landmark judgment that would have forced the oil and gas company to reduce its carbon emissions. Now, despite the ruling, climate activists are pledging to continue pushing to hold major CO2 emitters to account. Rosie Greninger reports.
A major disappointment for climate activists, as a Dutch appeals court in The Hague reversed a landmark ruling that required energy company Shell to accelerate carbon reduction efforts.
To be honest, I was just really disappointed. I was almost crying, and I was in there in the court. And we were just at first it looked really good for us, but then it just went downhill.
A 2021 verdict by a Dutch district court had ordered the gas giant to cut its carbon emissions by 45% by 2030, compared to 2019 levels. Shell argued the decision would hurt their business with no benefit to the fight against climate change, as customers would just shift to other suppliers. The court acknowledged the company has a human rights responsibility to reduce emissions, but said it could not force Shell to adhere to a specific reduction percentage. Shell claims they remain committed to becoming a net zero energy business by 2050, something the activist plaintiffs doubt, given the company decreased its carbon emission targets in March, citing sustained demand for fossil fuels.
But it's clear in the summary, the judge stated that the more than 800 oil and gas projects that are planned by Shell, that they are contradictory to the responsibility of Shell to reduce its CO2 emissions in accordance with international climate agreements and contributes to human rights violations.
The ruling comes as thousands of world leaders, negotiators and activists look for a way to fight global warming at the United Nations Annual Climate Summit, COP29, in Azerbaijan. The UN's chief telling attendees time is running out to tackle the climate crisis, urging countries and companies to work harder to adhere to the 2015 Paris Agreement that aims to limit the rise of global temperatures.
So doubling down on fossil fuels is absurd. The clean energy revolution is here. No group, no business, and no government can stop it. But you can and must ensure it is fair and fast enough to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
This ruling in the Netherlands, a setback towards that goal. But the activists who turn to legal channels to pursue the climate action have vowed to continue fighting, with Friends of the Earth expected to appeal the decision in the Supreme Court.
Obviously, we're not done with Shell. We're still going to campaign, we're still going to fight, and there's going to be lots of activism still. And if this isn't the way, there will be another way to make them reduce their emissions.
It could be years before there is a final ruling. But despite the Dutch Appeals Court decision favouring Shell this time, Climate lawyers say it is a step forward in bringing global corporate responsibility into the spotlight and the battle to hold the world's major polluters to account. Dolphine Chen and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
A major international baseball tournament is kicking off in Taipei tonight. Crowds are gathering at the Taipei Dome to see Taiwan play against some of the world's top national teams. Our reporter Sandy Chi is there.
Huge crowds are piling into the Taipei Dome for the WBSC Premier 12 baseball tournament. They're here tonight to watch Taiwan play against South Korea.
今天不管怎么样，一定要赢韩国，因为第一场，然后又对韩国，然后我们又派王牌林玉明，对，所以一定要赢。
每一位都喜欢，因为都是台湾英雄。
It's an important night for baseball fans. The Premier 12 only takes place every 4 years. It features the 12 highest-ranked national teams in the world. That includes Team Taiwan, ranked 5th this year, and playing under the name Chinese Taipei. The squad will play 5 matches at the Dome. This year, Team Taiwan aims to secure a spot in the top 4 for the first time ever. To reach that goal, all eyes are on Lin Yuming, Taiwan's starting pitcher. Lin is known for his impressive fastball and his breaking pitches. The stadium is said to be at full capacity tonight. Though the game has not started, you can already see fans here in the mood to cheer on Team Taiwan. Lian Lian, Isan Pan, and Sandy Chi in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Thanks for joining us here on TaiwanPlus News. And check out the TaiwanPlus website or follow our socials for more of our stories. Finally, come along with us to Myanmar to check out the annual Festival of Lights, marking the end of the rainy season. I'm Philip Brossard. Take care, and we'll see you next time.